My friends, before we can speak of supply, before we can touch even the hem of its meaning, we must first be very still. Not still in body alone, but still in thought, still in expectation, still in that restless reaching of the human mind that forever seeks to add something to itself. For supply is not a subject that yields itself to analysis. It does not unfold itself to reasoning. It is not discovered by study, nor secured by effort, nor increased by planning. Supply is known only when the human sense of life becomes quiet enough for truth to announce itself. We have been trained from infancy to believe that supply exists somewhere outside of us, that it must be earned, gathered, stored, protected, or pursued. We have been taught to look at forms, money, positions, opportunities, possessions, and to call these things supply. And yet, all the while, an uneasiness has followed us, a subtle fear that what we have today may not be here tomorrow. That fear alone should tell us something important. Whatever can be lost was never supply to begin with. Now, let us understand this clearly and without resistance. The fear surrounding money is not caused by money itself. It is caused by identification. It is caused by believing that life is sustained by something external, by believing that our good is dependent upon conditions, systems, or circumstances over which we have no true control. The moment we accept that belief, fear becomes inevitable. Anxiety becomes logical. Struggle becomes normal. And peace becomes rare. But I say unto you, as the Master said, take no thought for your life, what ye shall eat, or what ye shall drink, nor yet for your body. These were not poetic words meant to comfort the poor. They were not religious ideals meant for saints. They were a statement of spiritual law. They were spoken from a consciousness that knew where life is maintained and therefore knew where supply is found. We cannot approach this subject with the intent to get something from it. If you have come here hoping to learn how to increase income, improve finances, or secure material stability, you will be disappointed if you remain on that level of thought. For the infinite way does not teach how to improve effects. It reveals how to abide in cause. And when cause is realized, effects take care of themselves, without anxiety, without manipulation, and often without any visible planning at all. The first thing that must be understood, though it cannot yet be accepted intellectually, is this. Supply is not a thing. It is not substance in the human sense. It is not matter, money, or material accumulation. Supply is an activity of divine life, forever expressing itself as individual experience. And until we are willing to let go of our human definitions, until we are willing to be empty of what we think supply is, we cannot receive the revelation of what supply is. Be still and know that I am God. This is not a suggestion. It is not a discipline. It is the doorway. Only in stillness does the false sense of life loosen its grip. Only in stillness does the belief in lack begin to dissolve. Only in stillness can we hear that inner assurance which does not reason, does not explain, but simply is. In that stillness, something remarkable begins to dawn upon consciousness. We begin to sense that life is not precarious. We begin to feel, not emotionally but spiritually, that there is an order, a care, a presence already in operation. We may not yet understand it, but we begin to trust it. And this trust does not come from affirmations or repeated statements. It comes from contact. The trouble with most spiritual students is not that they lack faith, but that they try to use faith to fix appearances. They attempt to apply spiritual truth to material problems instead of allowing spiritual truth to lift consciousness above the level where problems appear real. Supply cannot be demonstrated from fear. It cannot be contacted from need. It cannot be realized while the mind is racing ahead, asking, "But what about tomorrow?" Jesus never asked that question. He knew that tomorrow takes care of itself when today is lived in truth. He knew that life does not unfold in segments, but as a continuous, eternal now, and it is in that eternal now that supply abides. Let us, then, at the very beginning of this contemplation, release the desire to understand. Let us abandon the attempt to figure out how this works. Let us drop, just for this moment, the belief that we are separate beings, living in a hostile or uncertain world. Let us rest, even briefly, in the possibility that life is governed by a wisdom greater than personal effort and sustained by a source that has never failed since the beginning of time. Before Abraham was, I am. These words were not spoken to impress. They were spoken to reveal identity. And until identity is understood, supply will always seem uncertain. But when identity begins to be glimpsed, not as human personality, but as divine expression, then something shifts quietly, gently, and permanently within us. We are not here to chase supply. We are here to awaken to it. Now that we have entered even slightly into stillness, we are prepared to see something that has been hidden in plain sight for centuries. The universal mistake made by nearly all mankind, religious and non-religious alike, is the belief that supply exists in its forms, that food is supply, that money is supply, that employment is supply, that land, property, investment, or savings is supply. And because this belief is universal, it is rarely questioned. It is accepted as fact, taught as wisdom, and defended as common sense. Yet spiritual truth has never been governed by common sense. Truth is revealed only to consciousness, willing to be overturned. When we look at the world through material sense, it appears obvious that if money disappears, supply disappears. If employment ends, supply ends. If resources are cut off, life itself becomes threatened. And yet, history and scripture stand as silent witnesses against this belief. For never once has life depended upon form in order to continue expressing itself. The Master did not deny bread. He multiplied it. He did not deny fish. He revealed its source. He did not condemn form. He refused to worship it. And here lies the great distinction. The infinite way does not teach that forms are evil or unnecessary. It teaches that forms are effects, and that effects have no power either to sustain or to destroy life. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added unto you. Notice carefully, the Master did not say, seek the things and the kingdom will follow. He placed cause before effect, consciousness before manifestation, identity before experience. And until this order is understood, we shall forever be running after the shadow, never realizing that the substance casting it is within us. Let us consider this quietly. A man may lose money overnight, yet live on. A woman may lose all possessions, yet continue to exist. But no one has ever lost life. No one has ever lost being. No one has ever lost the presence that animates existence. And if that presence remains intact, then supply, being an activity of that presence, has not been diminished, regardless of appearances. The fear that accompanies loss is not fear of hunger or shelter alone. It is fear of separation. It is the belief that something essential to life has been removed. But this belief rests entirely upon the assumption that life was dependent upon the thing lost. When that assumption is exposed, fear begins to loosen its grip. The infinite way reveals that supply does not come to us. It flows through us. It does not originate in banks, markets, or employers. These are channels temporary, changeable, and replaceable. Supply itself is the activity of divine life expressing as form, and form changes constantly without affecting the life behind it. We must come to see, and not merely agree, that money is never supply. Money is a symbol, a convenience, a temporary means of exchange. But the moment we believe it to be supply itself, we bind our peace to a symbol and surrender our security to conditions. That is why abundance does not bring peace, and poverty does not destroy life. Peace comes only when the source is known. Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. This was not a rebuke of bread. It was a revelation of priority. Bread feeds the body, but it does not create life. And whatever does not create life cannot sustain it. When we mistake form for substance, we begin to serve form. We labor for it. We fear its loss. We protect it. We compete for it. And in doing so, we unknowingly reverse the divine order. We place effect before cause, and then wonder why harmony eludes us. This mistake is subtle because it often hides behind gratitude. One may say, I am grateful for my supply, while meaning, I am grateful for my money. Yet gratitude directed at effect never brings freedom. Gratitude directed toward source brings rest, and rest opens the door to right unfoldment. You see, supply is not something we possess. It is something that operates. It is the ceaseless activity of God expressing as experience. And this activity cannot be interrupted, withheld, increased, or diminished. It can only be misunderstood. As long as we believe that supply exists outside of us, we will attempt to secure it. As long as we attempt to secure it, we will fear its loss. And as long as we fear its loss, we cannot rest in God. But the moment we recognize that supply is the very life we are, fear begins to dissolve, not because circumstances change, but because identity is restored. This is not a philosophy. It is not optimism. It is not positive thinking. It is the quiet recognition of spiritual fact. And spiritual facts do not need defense. They reveal themselves in experience when consciousness is ready. So let us gently, without argument, begin to loosen our attachment to forms, not by rejecting them, but by releasing their false role. Let us allow them to be effects again, not masters. Let us permit supply to return to its rightful place as divine activity, forever present, forever sufficient, forever unfolding. And when this begins to dawn, even faintly, the chase ends, the struggle softens, the mind grows quiet, and life, no longer resisted, begins to move with an intelligence that has always been there, waiting only to be acknowledged. Now we come to a point where the human mind must be willing to yield, for what is about to be seen cannot be reconciled with ordinary reasoning. Yet it is simple, so simple that a child can grasp it when the intellect steps aside. The Master used it often, and so did the prophets before him. It is the relationship between the tree and the fruit. No one has ever stood before an apple tree and worried about tomorrow's apples. No one has ever prayed to the fruit to increase itself. No one has ever accused the apples of failing when winter came and the branches stood bare. Why? Because everyone understands, without being taught, that fruit is an effect, not a cause. The life of the tree produces fruit in its season, and when the season passes, the life has not ended. It has merely withdrawn from visibility. And yet, when it comes to our own experience, we forget this simple truth. We look at the fruit of our lives, money, possessions, conditions, and we judge life itself by their appearance. When the fruit is abundant, we feel secure. When it seems scarce, we feel threatened, but never once do we question whether the life producing the fruit has ceased. Here is the great revelation of supply. Life is the substance. Form is the effect, and substance cannot be lost, diminished, or exhausted. By their fruits ye shall know them, the Master said, not be sustained by them, not depend upon them, but know them. Fruit testifies to life. It does not create it. And the moment we reverse this order in our thinking, fear enters. For effects are unstable by nature. They change. They appear and disappear. They rise and fall. And anything that changes cannot be relied upon as source. When a fruit drops from a tree, it does not impoverish the tree. When a season passes, it does not diminish the life within the roots. In fact, the tree often grows stronger during seasons when no fruit is visible. So too in human experience, there are periods when forms recede not as punishment, not as failure, but as preparation for a deeper unfoldment. The tragedy is that we interpret these moments through fear instead of understanding. We say, "My supply is gone," when in truth, only a form has changed. We say, "I am losing," when nothing real has been touched. We say, "I must struggle," when life itself is simply asking us to stop living by effects and return to awareness of cause. Let us look again at the words of Scripture. "I am the vine, ye are the branches." Notice what is being said. The branch does not produce grapes by effort. It does not strain, calculate, or plan. It abides, and in abiding, fruit appears naturally. But the branch that believes it must produce fruit by its own strength will soon wither, not because life has left it, but because it has forgotten its source. Many sincere spiritual students exhaust themselves trying to demonstrate supply. They affirm, declare, visualize, and repeat truths, all the while remaining secretly afraid that without effort, nothing will happen. This fear reveals the underlying belief that supply is something personal, something to be generated by human consciousness. But divine supply is not personal. It is impersonal, impartial, and eternally active. "You did not choose me," the Master said, "but I chose you and ordained you that ye should go and bring forth fruit." The ordination is life itself. The choosing is divine. The fruit is inevitable when identity is not resisted. When supply is understood as life expressing, the pressure disappears. The frantic need to secure the future fades. Planning becomes simple, not anxious. action becomes guided, not driven. And most importantly, peace appears before conditions change. This peace is the first sign that we have touched substance rather than effect. We must come to see that what we call loss is often only the falling away of a form that no longer matches the consciousness unfolding within us. New fruit cannot grow on old branches forever. Life is progressive. It moves, it unfolds, and when we cling to past forms out of fear, we resist the very supply we are seeking. There is no lack in life. There is only lack in our interpretation of appearances. And appearances have never told the truth about God. The moment we begin to identify supply with life itself, rather than with what life produces, a quiet confidence takes root. We may not yet see how tomorrow will unfold, but we are no longer afraid of it. We no longer measure our security by bank balances or circumstances, but by an inner assurance that cannot be shaken. All that the Father hath is mine. This was not spoken as a promise of future reward. It was spoken as present fact. And when it is understood even faintly, the need to chase fruit dissolves. One tends the tree instead, not by effort, but by recognition. Supply is not something you get. It is something you are letting express. And when this becomes clear, the struggle ends not because the world has changed, but because consciousness has returned to truth. Now we arrive at the point where the teaching either becomes living truth or remains beautiful words. For everything we have spoken thus far leads inevitably to one question, and this question cannot be avoided, postponed, or softened. It must be faced quietly, honestly, and without defense. The question is this: who are you? Most of the world lives as though this question were already answered. I am a man, one says. I am a woman. I am a worker, a provider, a seeker, a body with needs and responsibilities. And from this assumed identity flows the entire drama of supply and lack, effort and reward, fear and hope. But spiritual living begins only when we are willing to admit that we may not yet know who we are. Jesus did not speak as one hoping to receive from God. He spoke as one who knew his oneness with God. And because of this, supply followed him, not as effort, not as miracle, but as natural expression. The Father that dwelleth in me, he doeth the works. This was not humility in the human sense. It was accuracy. It was right identification. The moment we identify ourselves as receivers, we place supply outside ourselves. We make ourselves dependent. We wait. We plead. We ask. And often we justify this attitude with prayer. But prayer that proceeds from the belief that we are separate from Source can never bring rest. It can only bring hope, and hope is always uncertain. The infinite way reveals something radically different. It reveals that you are not a vessel waiting to be filled, but an avenue through which life is already flowing. You are not an empty consciousness seeking supply. You are consciousness itself expressing as experience. And until this shift in identification occurs, supply will always feel fragile. I can, of mine own self, do nothing, Jesus said. These words have been misunderstood for centuries. They have been taken to mean weakness, dependence, submission, but in truth, they express liberation. For the one who knows he can do nothing of himself has ceased trying to be a source. He has surrendered the false burden of personal power, And in that surrender, divine power moves unobstructed. The human sense of self wants to be the doer, the planner, the achiever. It wants credit for success and excuses for failure. But this self cannot produce supply, no matter how sincere its efforts. It can only manipulate forms. And manipulation always leads to fear, because it knows its own limitations. But when identity shifts, when one no longer sees oneself as a separate entity living in a hostile or uncertain universe, something extraordinary happens. Supply is no longer sought. It is expected. Not expected with confidence or arrogance, but with quiet knowing. The kind of knowing that does not ask how. Let us be clear. This does not mean that you, as a person, are the source. That would be another error, and just as limiting. It means that the life which you are is the source, and that life is God. Individuality is not denied. It is spiritualized. Personality is not exalted. It is put in its proper place as instrument, not origin. Before Abraham was I am, this was not a statement of time, but of identity. The I am is not a person. It is being itself. And when you say I, you are touching the edge of that mystery. The problem arises when the mind rushes in and defines the I as body, history, condition, or bank account. Right identification is the recognition that your true self is not the receiver of supply, but the place where supply appears. Just as light does not come to a window but shines through it, so supply does not come to you, it expresses through you. The window does not create the light, nor does it own it. It simply remains unobstructed. Most of the obstacles to supply are not external. They are internal identifications. I am unemployed. I am struggling. I am lacking. Each of these statements claims an identity that has nothing to do with truth. And whatever we identify as ourselves, we empower. But when we withdraw identity from conditions and return it to being, conditions begin to rearrange themselves without strain. This is why the Master could say, "Fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom, not to loan it, not to grant it temporarily, to give it meaning, to reveal what already is. The kingdom is not a future reward. It is a present reality, recognized only when false identity dissolves. We are not here to become something new. We are here to remember what we have always been. And when this remembrance begins to dawn, supply ceases to be a problem. It becomes an aspect of life, as natural, as breath, as effortless as heartbeat. The question then is no longer, how will I get supply, but who am I willing to let live my life? And when the answer to that question is no longer personal, no longer fearful, no longer striving life answers in ways that cannot be explained, only lived. As identification begins to shift, another subtle error reveals itself, one so common, so widely accepted, that few ever recognize it as bondage. It is the belief that supply flows through specific channels, and that these channels must be protected, preserved, or controlled in order for life to continue harmoniously. The world bows before its channels. Employment becomes a god. Business becomes a god. Clients, markets, governments, savings, inheritance, each is silently enthroned as a power capable of giving or taking away, And while the lips may speak of God as source, the heart often trembles at the thought of losing a channel. This trembling reveals where faith truly rests. Let us be honest, without judgment. The fear that arises when a job is threatened is not fear of work. It is fear of losing supply. The anxiety that appears when money fluctuates is not concern for numbers. It is concern for survival. And yet, if supply truly comes from God, how can it be endangered by the loss of a human arrangement? Here is where the infinite way makes a clear and uncompromising distinction. Channels are effects, never causes. They are means, not origins. They appear, change, and disappear according to consciousness, not according to chance. And when we mistake a channel for source, we unknowingly give it power it does not possess. The prophet spoke plainly. They have but the arm of flesh, but we have the Lord our God. The arm of flesh may appear strong for a season, but it has no sustaining power. It cannot originate good. It can only transmit what consciousness permits. And when consciousness is lifted above dependence on form, new channels appear as naturally as old ones fade. One of the greatest fears in human experience is the fear of having no way. But there has never been a moment in which divine life lacked a way to express itself. The belief that there is only one channel is itself the limitation. It is a mental fence built around infinite possibility, and life does not honor fences. When a channel closes, it is not a verdict against us. It is not punishment, failure, or loss of favor. Often, it is evidence that consciousness has outgrown a form. But if we cling to that form out of fear, we delay the next unfoldment. We try to resurrect what life is finished with instead of allowing what life is preparing. This is why the Master warned against laying up treasures where moth and rust doth corrupt. He was not condemning possession. He was revealing impermanence. Anything that can be taken away was never meant to be leaned upon. Only that which is eternal can bear the weight of trust. When dependence shifts from channels to source, something remarkable happens. We continue to work, to act, to participate in the world, but without fear. We no longer serve the channel. The channel serves the activity of life, and when it no longer serves, it quietly dissolves, making room for another. There is a deep peace that comes when one realizes, I have never been sustained by a job, a person, or a system. I have been sustained by life itself. That life may have used a job, a person, or a system for a time, but it was never confined to them. Call no man your father upon the earth, for one is your Father which is in heaven. This was not irreverence, it was freedom. It was a call to withdraw power from persons and place it where it belongs, in the infinite activity of being. The moment we stop fearing the loss of channels, we stop interfering with divine unfoldment. We become available, we listen, we move when moved, and life arranges itself with an intelligence that far exceeds personal planning. This does not mean recklessness. It means trust without attachment. It means gratitude without dependence. It means recognizing that supply does not flow from a channel, but through it, and that the flow itself is eternal. So let us gently loosen our grip. Let us stop worshiping effects. Let us return power to where it has always belonged. For when source is trusted, channels are never a concern. They appear as needed, disappear when finished, and leave no fear behind. And in this freedom, life begins to feel lighter, not because responsibility is gone, but because fear is. At this point, it becomes necessary to return to the Master himself, not to quote him as authority, but to listen to him as one who spoke from realization. Too often his words are admired, memorized, repeated yet rarely entered, and among all his statements on supply, none is more revealing than the quiet sentence spoken to his disciples, "I have meat to eat that ye know not of." These words were not metaphor, they were not encouragement, they were not symbolic poetry, they were a factual statement of spiritual experience. Jesus was not denying hunger nor rejecting food. He was revealing a level of life that is sustained independently of material conditions. He was testifying to a source of nourishment that precedes form and remains when form is absent. The disciples, thinking materially as most of the world still does, asked among themselves whether someone had brought him food. They missed the point entirely, and this moment stands as a mirror for all spiritual students. Whenever truth speaks, the human mind translates it into form. Whenever spirit reveals, thought tries to explain it in terms of matter. But Jesus was speaking from another altitude of consciousness. He was not sustained by circumstances. He was not dependent upon visible provision. He lived from within, outward, and because of this, supply followed him as shadow follows substance. Let us pause with this. I have meat, not I will have, not I hope to have, not God will give me, but I have. Present tense, completed fact, conscious awareness. And then the revealing phrase, that ye know not of. In other words, supply exists beyond what the senses report. Life is nourished from a source the human mind does not recognize until consciousness awakens. This is why spiritual supply cannot be contacted through anxiety. Fear belongs to the realm of appearances. Fear reasons from what is seen, measured, and predicted. But spiritual supply flows from what is unseen, immeasurable, and eternal. And until we are willing to let go of sense testimony as final authority, we will remain blind to the very thing sustaining us. Jesus lived from the awareness of divine life as substance. He knew that life feeds itself. He knew that consciousness is nourished by truth. He knew that being is self-sustaining, and because he lived from this knowing, he could say without strain, "The Father knoweth that ye have need of these things." Not might know, not will know, knoweth. We have misunderstood this teaching by trying to imitate the words without sharing the consciousness. We quote, "Take no thought," while continuing to take thought. We speak of trust while secretly calculating outcomes. But Jesus did not trust blindly, he trusted knowingly. His peace did not come from belief, but from direct contact with Source. This meat of which he spoke is not mystical abstraction. It is the felt assurance of life within. It is the quiet certainty that being is intact, complete, and uninterrupted. It is the awareness that even when the cupboard appears empty, life is not empty. Even when forms are absent, substance is present. And here is the important point. This inner nourishment does not replace outer supply. It governs it. When consciousness is fed from within, outer provision arranges itself naturally. But when consciousness is starved, when it depends entirely on appearances, no amount of outer accumulation brings peace. My Father worketh hitherto, and I work. Jesus did not rest because nothing was happening. He rested because everything was happening. Life was active, unfolding, sustaining, providing without his interference. And this is the invitation offered to us as well. Supply is not something we persuade God to give. It is something we stop obstructing by fear. It is already present as life, waiting only for recognition. And recognition comes not through effort, but through surrender, through the quiet letting go of false dependence. When we begin to taste this meat, anxiety loses its grip. We may still act in the world, but we no longer live from the world. We work, but not for survival. We plan, but without fear. We receive, but without attachment. And life responds with a harmony that cannot be forced, only allowed. This is why Jesus could feed multitudes without concern for supply. He was not producing food. He was acknowledging life. He was not changing matter. He was revealing source. And when source is recognized, effects multiply effortlessly. So let us not ask for more bread. Let us awaken to the substance from which bread appears. Let us not seek meat. Let us discover the life that feeds itself. And when this discovery begins to dawn, we understand at last that supply was never missing. It was simply unrecognized. Now, if what has been shared thus far is allowed to sink below the level of thought, a subtle but decisive reversal begins to take place within consciousness. It is not dramatic. It does not announce itself loudly. It feels rather like a deep exhalation after years of holding the breath. This reversal is the movement from getting to unfolding. Nearly all human living is based on the assumption that good must be acquired. We speak of getting a job, getting money, getting security, getting ahead. Even in religion, we speak of getting closer to God, getting answers to prayer, getting blessings. And this language reveals our premise that good exists somewhere else and that we must reach it, earn it, or persuade it to come to us. But spiritual living begins the moment this premise collapses. For nothing that is real needs to be gotten. Truth does not arrive. Life does not increase. God does not move closer. What unfolds is not supply, but awareness. And as awareness unfolds, experience rearranges itself accordingly. The struggle to get supply is the surest sign that we believe ourselves to be separate from it. And as long as that belief remains, effort seems necessary. But effort always carries strain, and strain always produces fear. This is why so many sincere people, even after years of prayer and study, remain anxious about provision. They are still trying to make something happen. Yet the infinite way reveals that nothing needs to be made to happen. Life is already happening. Supply is already flowing. The only question is whether we are aligned with it or resisting it through fear and personal will. Consider the lilies of the field. They do not get clothed. They do not work for beauty. They unfold. And Jesus was not romanticizing nature. He was pointing to law. The same law that clothes the lilies operates in human experience when consciousness ceases to interfere. Interference takes many forms. Worry is interference. Planning rooted in fear is interference. Hoarding is interference. And even prayer that tries to direct outcomes can be interference. All of it arises from the belief that life must be managed. But when the inner reversal occurs, when one stops trying to live from outcomes and begins living from being, something remarkable happens. Action becomes simpler. Decisions arise naturally. Needs are met, often in unexpected ways. And most importantly, peace appears before the evidence. This is the great secret. Peace is not the result of supply. It is the condition in which supply unfolds. As the Father hath life in himself, so hath he given to the Son to have life in himself. This is not a future gift. It is a present fact. Life is self-sustaining. And when we cease to believe that life depends on personal effort, we enter into cooperation with a power that has never failed. Unfoldment is gentle. It does not rush. It does not strain. It does not announce its plans. It moves step by step, moment by moment, revealing only what is needed when it is needed. And this is why fear cannot see it. Fear demands, guarantees. Unfoldment offers presence. Many ask, but what about practical matters? And the answer is always the same. When consciousness is right, practice takes care of itself. The infinite way does not ignore the world. It puts the world in its proper place. It does not deny action. It removes desperation from action. You may still work. You may still engage in business. You may still use money, but you no longer live for these things. They become tools, not masters. Effects, not causes. Expressions, not source. This reversal from getting to unfolding is the end of anxiety. For anxiety can exist only where the future is feared, but unfoldment happens now. It is always now. And in this now, life is complete. When one truly begins to live this way, the question, will I have enough, quietly fades away. Not because it has been answered intellectually, but because it no longer feels relevant. Something deeper has taken its place. A quiet assurance that life knows how to live itself. Thy grace is sufficient for thee, not will be, is. And grace does not arrive by effort. It is revealed when effort stops. So let us stop chasing. Let us stop grasping. Let us stop asking life to prove itself. Let us rest even briefly in the awareness that what we are seeking is already seeking expression through us. And in that rest, supply unfolds not as miracle, not as reward, but as the natural activity of life being itself. At this stage of the contemplation, a misunderstanding often arises, one that must be gently dissolved. When we speak of stillness, of yielding, of resting in being, the human mind assumes passivity. It imagines withdrawal from life, inaction, or indifference. But spiritual stillness is not inactivity. It is the cessation of personal interference so that divine activity may be revealed. Stillness is not something we do to get supply. It is not a method. It is not a discipline practiced to produce results. Stillness is the natural state of consciousness when fear has loosened its grip, and from that state, right action flows without strain. Most human action is taken to fix something. It is motivated by lack, fear, urgency, or pressure, and action taken from these motives carries their quality. It exhausts, it entangles, it multiplies complexity. But action that rises out of stillness carries a different authority. It is simple, direct, often minimal, and it bears fruit beyond proportion to effort. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. This was not counsel to do nothing. It was instruction to stop doing the wrong thing. It was a call to pause human will long enough for divine direction to be recognized. And this principle applies to every area of life, including supply. Before any step is taken, before any decision is made, before any plan is formed, there must be a moment, however brief, of inward listening. Not listening for words, not listening for guidance in human language, but listening for that quiet assurance which says yes, or wait, or sometimes simply be still. This listening cannot be rushed. It cannot be demanded. It comes only when the mind is no longer insisting on a particular outcome. As long as we approach stillness, asking, "What should I do to get supply?" we remain on the level of getting. But when we enter stillness with the simple acknowledgement, life is present here, something shifts. In that acknowledgement, fear relaxes, the future loosens its grip, and awareness widens just enough for intuition to be felt, not as excitement, not as emotion, but as clarity. Often, the guidance that arises is very ordinary. It may lead us to make a phone call, take a walk, rest, speak to someone, or do nothing at all. But because it arises from stillness, it carries a sense of rightness. There is no pushing, no anxiety, no compulsion. This is the difference between human planning and divine unfolding. Human planning asks, "How can I make this work?" Divine unfolding reveals, "This is already working." Stillness before action is the recognition that supply does not depend upon our cleverness. It depends upon our receptivity. And receptivity is not achieved by effort, but by surrender. Many have found that when they take even a few moments each day to withdraw attention from appearances, bank balances, bills, forecasts, responsibilities, and rest in the simple awareness of being, something within them realigns. They do not necessarily receive instructions, but they receive peace. And peace is the soil in which right action grows. When thou prayest, enter into thy closet and shut the door. This was not instruction to escape the world, but to close the door on sense testimony, to shut out the noise of fear, prediction, and memory. And in that inner room, the Father which seeth in secret rewards openly. Not because he gives something new, but because what was hidden is now revealed. It is important to understand that stillness does not guarantee immediate visible results. It guarantees alignment. And alignment is more valuable than outcomes, because outcomes change, but alignment sustains. Action taken without stillness often multiplies effort. Action taken from stillness simplifies life. And over time, one begins to trust this process, not blindly, but experientially. One sees that when action is preceded by inner rest, supply appears with less friction, less struggle, and often with unexpected grace. This is why the Infinite Way places such emphasis on frequent pauses throughout the day. Not long meditations necessarily, but moments of withdrawal from the belief that life is hard, demanding, or uncertain. In those moments, we do not ask for supply. We acknowledge presence. And presence takes care of form. So let us not fear stillness. Let us not imagine that it removes us from responsibility. It removes only the burden of personal control. And when that burden is lifted, we discover that life has always known how to live itself. Supply, contacted in stillness, does not rush. It unfolds. It does not announce itself with noise. It appears quietly, naturally, inevitably. And when we learn to act after stillness instead of from fear, we find that life becomes not easier, but lighter. As this contemplation ripens, one question naturally arises in the human mind. How are we to live in a world where appearances seem so convincing? For the world does not suddenly become still because we have glimpsed truth. News continues. Bills arrive. Conditions fluctuate. Forms appear and disappear. And yet, something within us has changed or is changing. Anxiety is not caused by appearances themselves. It is caused by believing appearances have power. The moment we accept that outer conditions possess authority over life, but the infinite way reveals that appearances are not causes, they are effects, temporary pictures, projected by consciousness. Jesus never denied appearances. He walked among sickness, lack, and fear, but he did not grant them reality. He did not react to them. And because he did not react, they lost their claim to power. Judge not according to the appearance, but judge righteous judgment. This was not moral instruction. It was spiritual law. To live without anxiety does not mean to live without challenges. It means to live without false conclusions. It means refusing to accept that what is seen defines what is real. It means recognizing that life is intact even when conditions suggest otherwise. Anxiety feeds on projection. It lives in tomorrow, in what might happen, in what could be lost. But spiritual consciousness lives in now, and in now, life is always present, always sufficient. The future has no power except the power we give it through fear. When one begins to live from inner awareness rather than outer evidence, anxiety loosens its hold, not because problems vanish instantly, but because problems are no longer personalized. They are seen as appearances moving across consciousness, not as threats to being. Which of you, by taking thought, can add 1 cubit unto his stature? Thought rooted in fear cannot sustain life. It can only exhaust it. But when thought rests in truth, life flows without strain. This is not indifference. It is spiritual poise. It is standing in the midst of appearances without bowing to them. And this poise grows quietly, naturally, as trust replaces fear. Not trust in outcomes, but trust in life itself. Eventually, if this path is walked sincerely, something remarkable occurs. The chase ends, not because every desire has been fulfilled, but because desire itself has changed. We no longer seek supply, we seek alignment. And in alignment, supply appears as a byproduct, not a goal. Chasing is always a sign of separation. It assumes that good is elsewhere. But when identity is restored, when we know ourselves as expressions of divine life, the need to pursue dissolves. We begin to live with life, not against it. Except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. This does not condemn labor. It reveals misplaced effort. When life is lived from personal will, labor is endless. When life is lived from divine activity, effort becomes cooperation. Letting life live itself does not make us passive. It makes us responsive. We move when moved. We speak when spoken through. We act when action is required. And because we are no longer driven by fear, our actions carry clarity and grace. Supply, then, becomes something we witness rather than manage. We see how needs are met, not always as expected, not always in the way the mind would choose, but always sufficiently, always appropriately. And this witnessing builds confidence far deeper than belief. We stop measuring life by accumulation and begin measuring it by peace. We stop asking whether we have enough and begin knowing that life is enough. And in that knowing, forms adjust naturally. This is the end of striving, not because striving was sinful, but because it was unnecessary. Now we come to rest, not to a conclusion, but to a stillness. Nothing more needs to be said. Nothing more needs to be done. The truth has not been given to you. It has been remembered. All that the Father hath is mine. These words are not poetry. They are identity. They are the quiet fact of being when separation dissolves. They do not promise future reward. They reveal present reality. Let us not attempt to carry this teaching away in the mind. Let us not repeat it, analyze it, or apply it mechanically. Let it live itself within us. Let it surface in moments of fear, not as words, but as calm. Let it express as trust, as patience, as willingness to wait without anxiety. Supply is not something to be achieved. It is something to be recognized. And recognition does not shout, it whispers. So we leave this contemplation not with instruction, but with silence. Not with effort, but with rest. Not with expectation, but with assurance. Life knows how to live itself. God knows how to provide. And you are not separate from that knowing. Be still and let it be so.